So the next topic that I want to get to in this discussion or this monologue is yoga, the practice of yoga, specifically yin yoga, and those words that my mother shared with me, or much more, her experience of fear. It is a human experience. We all fear. We experience fear. We experience happiness. We have a multitude of experiences. But it was yin yoga that set me on a specific direction. And as I was practicing yin yoga, and the way that I was practicing was, I wasn't doing it in silence. I had my earbuds in, and I was listening to podcasts from many speakers, both the known and, or some of you may know, or some of you may not know. And I think I was searching for something in the words that they were saying. When one speaker didn't resonate with me, I moved to another one, and I moved to another one, and I moved to another one. And all the time practicing in yoga, getting my body, flexing my body, and getting into all sorts of poses and feeling the stretching sensations and somewhat discomfort. I wouldn't say it's pain. It's not pain. It's more discomfort. And getting quite flexible at the same time. It was also helping me to deal with stress, and it certainly was helping me to deal with the pain that came with my condition. And then I came across a teacher or a speaker. Well, he wouldn't want. Well, he stated in many occasions that he didn't want to be called a teacher, but he was teaching, so I'll call him a teacher. It was a YouTube video, and the title of the YouTube video stated J. Krishnamurti's final words. And I still remember this video very clearly. It was of a very old Indian man, and he must have been, well, I initially thought he must have been in his 80s or 90s. He was sitting underneath a tree. He had a few people around him, and it was his final talk. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what made me click on that YouTube link or that video, but I'm happy I did. So I clicked on it. He looked old, very old. Well, he was 80 or 90 years old. But what amazed me was how alert he still seemed. He could still articulate what he was saying quite well. And it was really profound to witness. And in that final, what a strange way to be introduced to one of human beings' great teachers, is by learning about him from his final speech. Maybe not a speech, a talk. And so the person that was speaking, what he said really resonated with me. It captured me, his words. For the very first time, someone spoke about the human experience. From what I've heard, for the very first time for me, from what I perceived as a place of honesty and sincerity and with great love. So the person or the speaker's name is, as I come to later learn, because I did some research as I do, Jiddu Krishnamurti. And as he was speaking to a very small group that was surrounding him, it was quite a profound discourse, and anyone that has gotten this far in my monologue, I really encourage you to search for his final talk and maybe give it a listen. It may resonate with some people. It may not resonate with others. It resonated with me. That's why I'm sharing it. And what he spoke about was essentially, and just to sum it all up, he spoke about the nature of life, of death, and he spoke about meditation. And I still remember he ended off his talk in, "Let's sit in silence." And he sat there in silence. And whoever was sitting in the group, they sat in silence with him. And the video just carried on with him sitting in silence. But what a powerful and profound discourse. I watch it ever so now and then. Again, as I've watched many of his videos and podcasts from the foundation, I've listened to it over and over and over. And I can certainly tell you it's not an easy listen, to be honest with you. Many of the things he was saying did not make sense to me. Some of the things I've never heard in my life, the things that he was discussing and describing about the nature of human existence, of reality, of the world. It was completely new to me. It was like a breath of fresh air. And for many weeks and months, and I think well over a year, I listened over and over and over and over. Many times the same things over and over. Until I could understand it. I listened to his talks while driving. I listened to his talks when I went for a walk. I listened to his talks while sitting in nature, observing the ocean, maybe going on a hike. I listened to his talks everywhere, because I wanted to understand what he was actually saying. Because in between all of that, I was suffering from this condition, and he was also talking about suffering and the nature of suffering and everything else in life. If you would want to know more about, or would like me to make some more videos about Krishnamurti, I could, but I don't think it'll be true to what his wishes were. His wishes were that his words must be listened to as they were said, without any interpretation. And I think that really speaks to the purity of what he was trying to convey. Now, some things that he says in various discourses, in various interviews, in various monologues, may not make sense. It certainly didn't make sense to me. And that's why I listen to it over and over. I listen to it continuously. But essentially, his teachings covered the vast spectrum of the human experience. And when he first started to step onto the public stage, he said, what I've come to learn is a very famous line, or famous sentence, or famous speech. In some circles, it's well known. I certainly never heard of it. And I'm sure there's many that's watching this video probably has never heard of it themselves. Maybe some of you have, I don't know. But he essentially stated that life is a pathless land. That's what he stated. What that meant to me at that point in time? Nothing. I didn't know what it meant. I needed to explore it. He also taught that all human beings, or most human beings, let me not say all, majority of human beings, except for a small few, are conditioned. And we're all conditioned. I'm conditioned. Maybe a large majority of you that's watching this are conditioned. Some of us admit our conditioning, admit that we are conditioned, and some of us live in the delusion that there is no such thing as a conditioning. But we are conditioned, and that's an unfortunate fact. He also spoke about why the process of unconditioning yourself is essential. He voiced many views on politics. He spoke or had interviews or dialogues with many prominent figures of the time. In politics, in society, in the sciences. He spoke with other philosophers. He spoke with religious clerics, Buddhist monks. He spoke with physicists, neurologists. What I also found very fascinating is he had a lot to say about the coming of the computer age, or my partner would laugh when I say the computer age. He spoke about artificial intelligence. He was really ahead of his time. because many things that he spoke about has really manifested into our reality or our lived experience today. His teachings also emphasized on the importance of self-knowledge, so inward inspection, not superficially, but a very thorough inward investigation. He was a proponent of and spoke greatly of the non-self or the non-ego. His teachings were non-dualistic in his terms. He held the view that reality essentially was non-dual in nature. And he also taught that the freedom and truth that we seek lies entirely in internal inspection or investigation. And that was in deep conflict with the way I was brought up. So there was a lot of unconditioning that would be required if I was to embrace this. But I was up for the challenge, and I'm happy that I went down that path. So I just want to, before I get into the path of arriving at different views of reality, I just want to share some of his very famous quotes. So various topics he spoke about. So on the topic of truth and freedom, he spoke, or his words were, and there's a few quotes that I'll just read off. It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Yeah, I imagine that. He had very scathing views of the structure of society. He also stated that truth is a pathless land, as I mentioned earlier, and you cannot approach it by any path whatsoever, by any religion, by any sect. He further stated, the world does not want you to think. It does not want you to be free to find out, because you would then be a danger. You would be fit. You would not fit into the established pattern, and how true that is. And then finally, on truth and freedom, he stated that it is truth that liberates, not effort to be free. On the topic of the mind and the self, he stated, the ability to observe without evaluating is the highest form of intelligence. To understand yourself is the beginning of wisdom. He further stated that a mind that is full of conclusions is a dead mind. It is not a living mind. Additionally, if the mind is tethered to belief or knowledge, it ceases to follow the swift movement of what is. That all these words really resonated with me as I listened to them. I just added one more to this list, which I noticed was not on my initial list. And he stated, it's a very famous statement he made: the observer is the observed. Now, those words confounded me for many months because I needed to understand this at a very deeper level. On the topic of love and fear, he stated that love is not about holding on. Love is about letting go. That's what true love is. On fear, fear is the destructive energy in man. It withers the mind. It distorts thought. It leads to all kinds of extraordinarily clever and subtle theories. And then, very similar to the observer is the observed, he also stated that you are the world and the world is you. You also have some views on education and wisdom. And for this, I only have 2 quotes. You stated that true education is to learn how to think, not what to think. And then on intelligence, you stated that intelligence is not knowledge. You could read all the books in the world and it would not give you intelligence. Wow. Those are so true. Truer words if I couldn't say that myself. So as I indicated, I listened to his teachings, I think for well over a year. And over, listening and listening and listening and listening and listening. And trying to grasp what he was saying. And then slowly but surely, those parts of what he was saying that I tried to understand as certain realizations in the most strangest of moments, they came through while eating. So as I'm eating, he said, oh, that's what he meant. While showering, mindlessly showering, and then, that's what those words mean. While talking to a friend, it just, I still remember one day I was walking with a friend, we're talking, it's like, oh my gosh, that's what he meant. And then I shared my thoughts with this friend. Or even just while sitting and observing, eventually those thoughts started to make a lot more sense to me. His teaching was not dogmatic. It was not grounded in dogma or any religion. He discouraged any form of association with formal religion. And please don't get me wrong, I'm not discounting formal religion. It provides comfort for many people, but it wasn't enough for me. And what he said resonated with me. And his views that finding truth in whatever your experience or your challenge is in your life is not out there. Your truth is not out there. The truth is inside, and it requires a thorough investigation internally. Then after a while, after listening to him, there was a day when things changed. There was a moment of pure clarity. And it was the day that I was listening to one of his discourses on pain and suffering. And I never listened, strangely enough, to this. He has hundreds of documented interviews and discourses. He could speak various languages. I obviously only listened to the English ones, but he could speak in Italian and French and Italian, French, Spanish, and probably some of the local languages of India, where he was born. But on this day, this is the day when things changed. I'm listening to his discourse on pain and suffering. And maybe I did listen to it, but it just didn't hit me. But on this day, I paid particular attention to that discourse. As expected, this is going to be a very long video. Wonder how long I'm sitting here. Oh my gosh, it's almost 25 to 6, and I think I started probably about 3:30. Anyway, what can I talk? When I'm passionate about something, I can talk a lot about it. You said that, and I think maybe I should just read the highlights from the talks. On pain, observe the pain without escaping. Now, I just want to put a caveat in there, and this is what also he discussed in this very lengthy discourse on pain and suffering. He encouraged the experience of pain, the experience of suffering, to observe it. If the pain and suffering is of a psychological nature, seek help. Seek help from professionals, but also put in the work. On the issue of physiological pain, and in particular neurological or neuropathic pain, which is what I was experiencing, observe it also. Observe the nature of the pain, what the experience is like. Observe it intently. Study it. But what he also stated was, but if the pain becomes so severe, seek help, get treatment. to ease the burden. He certainly didn't discourage medical treatment. He was a he really embraced the scientific approach. There were many scientists that worked very, very closely with him, debating many aspects of physics and neurology. So, and that I appreciated, because I didn't believe that not taking any medication or not seeking medical treatment should be something that should be frowned upon, that I can just wish the pain away. He was a pragmatist, and that's what I appreciated. I think that's why I stayed and I continued to listen. He spoke a lot about thought, and I'll get into thought, or I'll touch on thought, because I don't want to get into it too deeply. But I'll mention thought a bit later. He described thought as a trap. So the overthinking of pain and suffering becomes so entrenched, and where it becomes part of your existence. So it becomes symbiotic type of existence. One feeds off the other. And certainly that's where I was headed. And I needed to be conscious about it. I was becoming too attached to my condition, where I was becoming even to the point where I was associating myself with a condition, and that he outlined was not necessarily a good thing. It was actually quite a terrible thing to experience. It was certainly not a way that you should be living your life. He spoke about separating the observer and the observed. The thinker, he taught that the thinker and the thought are one. There is no observer, there is no observed. It's all one. It also speaks to the non-duality of his teachings. So when we observe pain, without labeling it as my pain, without the desire to escape it, the division between the one who experiences the pain and the pain itself dissolves, because essentially there is no pain. It's not as easy as that, and I'll get to why medication are necessary in dealing with pain. And he certainly wasn't, or rather he was not against seeking medical advice. He spoke of the pleasure-pain duality. So I've been focusing a lot in this monologue on suffering and pain. But too much pleasure can also be a bad thing. So you spoke about the pleasure-pain duality. Pleasure and pain are both sides of the same coin. The one feeds off the other. Pleasure can also lead to pain, can lead to deferred pain. So I'll use an example. I've derived great pleasure from drinking copious amounts of alcohol. The very next day I'll suffer a hangover. So I'll have pleasure and I'll have pain. Sometimes the pleasure is so far deferred into the future that we don't even realize where the actual pain or the suffering originated or first originated. He also said that pain can also lead to the attachment to it, which is the conclusion that I've come to. I certainly was becoming attached to my pain. And in that case, pain can also become entrenched. And with that, it causes further consequences as well. So it's one thing to deal with the pain. It's another thing for that pain to manifest itself into other aspects of your life, in your behaviors, in the way that you interact with people. And as I mentioned earlier, pain and suffering starts at a point. Once that attachment grabs hold and we start to associate ourselves with that pain, the pain becomes part of us. It starts to manifest itself in other parts of our lives, in our behaviors, in the way we interact with people. I'm in so much pain, so I'm grumpy, or I'm unkind to someone. They don't understand what I'm going through. It's my pain, not your pain. And that's not a great way to, well, conduct yourself, but also not a great way to live your life. So this is all good and well theoretically, I thought. How does this translate into a practical application in life? And you can speak about pain and suffering, and sometimes suffering is a consequence and pain is a consequence of our own actions. But there are times that pain is a consequence of, or not a consequence of our own action. Sometimes it's not our fault. It's not our fault. Sometimes the affliction is what we are born with. Sometimes it's an affliction as a result of an accident. Sometimes the suffering is caused by someone else. Sometimes it is of our own making, and we should take ownership of it. But whether pain is, or suffering is as a result of our making or not, doesn't take away from the fact that it exists. So for me, certainly, this neurological condition exists. Whether it was of my own making or not is really irrelevant. After months of contemplation, I listened to his talks over and over, with no end goal in mind, but maybe just to find some form of peace and comfort. In the meantime, I was also trying other medical procedures, and in parallel to this, yoga, etc. Continue to listen to his talks. It gave me a bit of hope, and I think there are times that hope is also needed. Then there was a moment where I listened to a dialogue between him and a Buddhist monk. And I listened to this dialogue, but I was a bit more interested in this particular one. Not because it was a Buddhist monk, but more the way that more in terms of what they were discussing, more in terms of how similar the content of their discussions were, even though they may be using different words and different terminologies. It certainly was very, very similar, and it made me start to wonder about Krishnamurti's background. And that's when I decided to dig a bit deeper and just to understand where that's originated from. And so I looked into his much earlier years, before the Truth is a Pathless Land speech. And that's when I discovered that he was adopted or taken into a society. The society is called the Theosophical Society. I think they still exist in existence today, but at that time, the early 1900s, they were quite prominent in the West. They were well funded by very influential people in the United Kingdom and in the United States. And he was taken into that society. Now, the Theosophical Society, amongst its many teachings and concepts, they incorporated Buddhist teachings. That's when I realized this is where we became exposed to Buddha's teaching. And that's why in that conversation, albeit there was some differences, there were also similarities between what this Buddhist monk was saying and what Krishnamurti was saying. And it made me wonder even more. So after that interview, I decided to pause listening to Krishnamurti. And after listening to him for well over a year, I decided to put Krishnamurti aside for a moment. And then I decided to look a bit more deeper into Buddhism.
You have to be a light to yourself, not the light of a professor or an analyst or a psychologist or the light of Jesus or the light of the Buddha. You have to be a light to yourself in a world that is utterly becoming dark.